Hi, and welcome to today's event, GovTech Academy, Crisis Communications and Social Media. I'm Dustin Heisler, the Chief Innovation Officer for Government Technology. I'm excited to serve as a moderator for today's event and just want to say thank you for joining us. I know we're in for an informative session over the next 90 minutes. Before we begin, a couple brief housekeeping notes. A recording of this presentation will be emailed to all registrants within 48 hours. You can use this recording for your reference or feel free to pass it along to your colleagues. This webcast is designed to be interactive, and you can participate in Q&A with us by asking questions at any time during the presentation. You should see a Q&A box on the bottom left of the presentation panel. Please send in your questions as they come up throughout the presentation. We're mixing things up a little bit for today's GovTech Academy. After each speaker's section, there will be a brief period of time for them to answer any questions that you may have regarding the material they presented. If you would like to download a PDF of the slides for this presentation, you can do so by clicking the Webinar Resources widget at the bottom of the console. Also, during today's webinar, you'll be able to connect with your peers via LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. Please use hashtag GovTechLive to connect with your peers across the government technology platform via Twitter. At the close of this webinar, we'll encourage you to complete a brief survey about the presentation. We'd like to hear what you think. If you're unable to stay with us for the entire webinar but would like to complete the survey, as much as you're able to, please click the red survey widget at the bottom of the screen to launch the survey. Otherwise, it will pop up once the webinar concludes. At this time, we recommend that you disable your pop-up blockers, and if you're experiencing any media player issues or have any other technical problems, please visit our webcast help guide by clicking on the Help button on the bottom of the console. Today, I'm joined by an amazing cast of individuals. Jeannie Willard, the Public Information Officer for the City of South Daytona, Florida. Christie Wyatt, Director of Communications and Intergovernmental Relations for the City of San Marcos, Texas. And Anil Chawla, Founder and CEO for ArchiveSocial. The flow for our presentation today, I'll kick things off by going through really what's happening within state and local government when it comes to crisis. And then we're going to let Jeannie Willard talk about what she is doing in South Daytona and how they're able to manage crisis more effectively using social media. Christie Wyatt with San Marcos will have an opportunity to share what she's doing in Texas. And then we'll wrap it up with Anil talking about what he's seeing across the country and lessons that we can all learn and that we can take back to our agencies. So I want to start with a poll just to kind of gauge who is on the webinar today. So as you may see on your screen right now, you have a poll question. The first question is, have you experienced a crisis situation in your jurisdiction? So take a few seconds and answer that question, and we'll move on to the results. It looks like about 50% of you have and 50% of you haven't. Great. Next question. What is your role in the event of a crisis? Are you an emergency or incident manager? Are you the PIO? Are you city administration? Are you in technology, public safety, or other? Take a few moments to answer that question. Looks like we've got about 50% PIO, 16% city administration, and the rest technology. Great. Thank you for joining us. And our last question, does your emergency communication plan currently include using social media during an emergency event? Yes, no, or unsure? Great. 72.2% of you have social media embedded into your policy today. That's fantastic news. So the purpose of this GovTech Academy is to really talk about crisis communication in the modern age. We have social media, which is a valuable tool that many agencies are using to engage constituents, to find out valuable information about what's happening, but it's also an incredibly powerful tool in the event of a crisis. And so today's discussion is really designed to talk about that and to really let you learn from people that are in the market that have dealt with these issues before so that you have some valuable lessons that you can take away from experiences that these individuals have had. So, what is a crisis? When you think about a crisis, the definition of a crisis is defined by Webster's dictionary. It looks like we're having a little bit of a technical issue. As a time of difficulty, trouble, or danger. And so when you think about that, what that normally looks like is a flood or a natural disaster or something that is really kind of an act of God. And when you look at how often the term crisis is being used, it's starting to increase pretty significantly. In fact, this is a Google Trends report on just the frequency of occurrences that we're seeing this term come out. And so today when you look at it, you've got all kinds of different crises that will take place. And it's not just floods anymore, it's not just natural disasters, but there's lots of new types of issues that will arise that can create and wreak havoc on cities. So this is actually an article that the News and Observer reported on about a small town's ban on social media panels went viral on social media. And basically, this town's legislative policy actually impacted social media for that particular community. And it created this viral rumor online that actually wreaked havoc on the communication infrastructure for this community. And so this is a huge issue that we've seen that we really have to find new ways to address. So we think that we need to look at redefining what a crisis is in this modern age. So we would define this as any situation that started online or offline that creates a time of intense difficulty, trouble, or danger. So we take that original definition and we've expanded it because a crisis can originate from something that's posted online. And you'll hear stories about that today where someone has posted something to a Facebook page that actually creates a lot of trouble for that particular agency. And so it's time to rethink how we define it, and it's also time to rethink how we manage these types of crises. And so there was actually a study that came out recently where things that have gone viral online that have created issues for agencies, if they're not engaged, it continues to spiral out of control. But what one university found is when even as simple as one official post via social media comes into the mix, you have the ability to diffuse that situation very rapidly. And so we're going to talk about how social media can really be that vehicle. So before I hand it over to Jeannie, I want to give you one more poll question. What's your primary channel for communicating with citizens in a crisis today? Are you using your newspaper? Are you using local news, email? Are you using social media today as a primary channel, your website? Or are there other channels that are out there that aren't currently on this list? Great. 46.2% of you. We've got a lot of early adopters on here that are really using social media to drive some intense change. That's great. So I want to hand it over to Jeannie Willard, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a background as to Jeannie and why we're so excited to have her on the call today. She has served as the City of South Daytona's public information official since 2009. Her background includes work as a freelance writer and reporter, and she has been published in national and regional publications and magazines. In 2009, she received the National Association of Free Community Papers Best of the Best Second Place Award for Best Original News Story. In addition, she has served as the VP of Public Relations for the Volusia-Flagler Florida Public Relations Association and is currently a member of the Volusia-Flagler Public Information Network. Jeannie, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, Dustin. Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here today, and thank everyone for joining us. First, let me begin by saying I don't consider myself an expert on social media by any means, but I've had a lot of requests to share my experience and the lessons learned during an event in our city that became known as the duct tape dog incident. I thought we should start with kind of defining what a crisis communication is. Outside of a natural disaster, there are a number of things that can happen to threaten the reputation of your agency and invite negative public attention. You know, you just need to turn on the nightly news to realize that it could be an officer-involved shooting, a scandal involving one of your elected officials, or the actions of an employee. Whatever it is, it won't be business as usual because you'll be spending your time handling the public and the media. This next slide will give you a brief overview of the incident so that you can relate to some of the topics I cover. Over Thanksgiving weekend, a woman who self-identified as Katie Brown decided to duct tape her dog's muzzle shut and post it on Facebook. Along with that photo, she wrote, "This is what happens when you don't shut up." Then she made matters worse by doubling and tripling down on her comments, trying to rationalize her actions. She went on to write, "Don't panic, everyone. It was only for a minute, but hasn't barked since. Point made." And then, "I can't lie, I did it only for 60 seconds. It was timeout and no more barking." Unfortunately, she posted her location as South Daytona, Florida. So we ended up owning this crisis, despite, as it turned out, the incident did not occur in our city, and the poster, later identified as Catherine Lemansky, no longer lived in our city. But, as you can imagine, looking at this slide, that photo ignited a firestorm. People were outraged and demanded that the South Daytona Police Department take action. So this was certainly shaping up to meet the definition that I mentioned previously. We were receiving significant public attention, and it certainly wasn't business as usual, as tens of thousands of Facebook comments rolled into our page. Although the integrity of our agency was not threatened, as this incident went on, we did get some negative comments, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Let me add that we're an average-sized community of 12,500, and our social media presence was fairly low-key. I've mentioned this before, but when this happened, I was just trying to get to 500 likes for our city page. And to make matters more challenging, I was on vacation that weekend, 500 miles from home. I first learned of this when the police chief called me in the middle of the night on Friday and told me we had a problem. But I had my laptop and I have an air card, and that pretty much allows me to work from anywhere. By Saturday morning, the story had gone viral. In the meantime, back home, the police department was receiving hundreds of phone calls, and the city was receiving thousands of emails. This continued until Catherine Lemansky was found and charged with animal cruelty in Cary, North Carolina, about 4 days later. Take a moment and look at some of the stats I've posted on the lower right-hand side of the screen. We reached 1.7 million people and received nearly 24,000 comments and hundreds of direct messages. And that was all in addition to the phone calls and emails we received. This next slide will give you an idea of the kind of media attention. While I worked the social media and the police worked the case, media coverage exploded. As you can see on the screen, the story was covered by local, national, and even international news, including ABC, Worldwide, NBC, New York Times, The Today Show, the BBC, Huffington Post, and more. You know, I found this pretty amazing. I can't explain why this story had legs and other newsworthy incidents across the nation did not. But I guess that's why they call it going viral. It's a phenomenon that you can't predict or control. It's important to note that the news media used our Facebook page as a source for official city quotes and photos. Let me tell you that nothing gives you pause like seeing the post you wrote plastered on the Today Show screen. The takeaway from this is that your words will be used, even if they are attributed to a nameless city official. When you press enter, your message is possibly going worldwide. The next slide, I think probably the best way to handle this, and people have asked me, how do you prepare for something like this? Honestly, I wasn't prepared completely. I'm not sure that you could ever truly be prepared, but I think the place to start is with a plan. Most of us have disaster plans, but it's important to have a section that specifically addresses social media communications. While the basic planning premise is the same as any disaster plan, it just focuses more on how you will communicate and specifically use your social media platforms. You'll want to spend some time addressing related issues, such as, who's going to handle your social media? Who's qualified to step in and help you if you're overwhelmed? Are your passwords readily accessible? Do your postings need to be approved? Review your delivery systems. Are you going to be using Facebook, Twitter, your website, traditional media releases? And think about how you will tie your messaging all together and present a consistent message to the public. One of the things that I like to use is a checklist. You have to remember that things happen fast in social media. In our situation, we went from hundreds of messages to thousands of messages in less than 12 hours, and we quickly garnered worldwide attention. When you find yourself in the middle of a fast-moving event, it's easy to be distracted, so a checklist will help you organize your priorities. Some of the things you might want to look at include identifying who needs to be notified. This could be your boss, your council, employees. You don't want anyone, especially your boss, to be blindsided by something they know nothing about. Think about what is your optimal time for regular responses. I initially aim for every 2 hours for routine updates, but of course this is going to depend on the situation. In the case of a police investigation, as we were doing, you might not have any new information during that time period, but I found that you can always refresh previous information. And I actually received a lot of positive feedback at the end of the event, thanking the city and the police department for keeping the public informed on a regular basis. You'll want to coordinate your messages with other agency Facebook and social media pages. If your cell phone's ringing off the hook, leave a message letting the media know where they can go to get information. You don't have to answer every call. An email auto reply can also accomplish the same thing. South Daytona has the ability to put up a website alert on our home page, so we did use that to help keep people informed. And evaluate your need for additional resources. The police department had to bring in people to answer phones because of the volume of calls. So let's talk a little bit about messaging. Your overall goal is to promote consistent centralized messaging. First, you'll want to determine your key message. What is the overall message you want to get out? Identify what you most want the target audience to know, and that, of course, will depend on the type of incident. Our priority message was that we wanted the public to know we were aware of the Facebook posting, that we had opened an investigation, and that we would keep them informed. You'll want to craft a first holding message. That's the first message you post, when you really don't have all the details of what happened, but you want to assure the public that you're doing something and tell them when you'll update. Because social media moves very quickly and misinformation moves even faster, you really don't have the luxury of waiting for all the answers before posting something. When this incident began, we didn't know if this had occurred in our city. We didn't know if this woman lived in our city. And we didn't know if she was even using her real name. So we went with the facts we did know. Our message was that the authorities were aware, that someone had posted this photo, an investigation is opened, and we would provide updates. It's also handy to have some predetermined messages. This is applicable to any type of incident, whether it be a canned boil water alert or something else. Let me give you some examples. You could have a pre-written message that said, details of what happened are not available yet, but we want to assure the public that their safety is our top concern. Or for other types of incidents, we're aware of the allegations and are currently looking into the matter. We will provide an update on the Facebook page and website as soon as we have additional information to report. Now, these are very generic messages, but these are messages you can pull out and quickly customize to the situation you're dealing with. You'll want to verify things before posting. If it's from the police or fire department, make sure all the details are met for publication. And as I stated previously, write your postings as if they're going to appear on national television, because they will. Brief your frontline employees. Since this was a holiday weekend, I didn't have to worry about that, but ordinarily you'll have employees working out there who will be asked questions. What do you want them to be saying? Think about where you want to drive your audience in media. You want them to go where you want them to get the information. In this case, I used our Facebook page as the primary source. And don't forget to take a look at pre-scheduled Facebook postings. You don't want to have some lighthearted posting pop up in the middle of a serious situation. And don't forget, you can use Google Alerts to keep on top of what's being published out there. I want to talk about instant replies on Facebook. I don't know if you know about this. I didn't even know if the instant reply was available during our event, But if it was, I didn't know about it, and it would have been very valuable. Instant replies can be sent automatically as your page's first response to new messages. So when we were getting hundreds of messages from people asking if we were even aware of this, it was impossible to answer them all. So I could have crafted an instant reply stating that we knew about it and we've started the investigation, and then all the messages would have at least had an initial response. So this slide tells you how to turn them on, but that came right from Facebook, so you can certainly look it up easily. Let's talk about correcting erroneous information and handling negative comments. The question I am most frequently asked is, how did you handle the negative comments? I know there are municipalities and departments out there that don't even want social media because of the possibility of negative comments. That's an internal decision that must be made, but the reality is social media is designed to be interactive, which can be both good news and bad news. You have to be comfortable with that. I would say first, review your terms of service. What do you say you're going to do, and follow that. Next, decide if the comment is even worth addressing. For example, if someone makes a comment like, "The police are too busy eating donuts to catch this woman," well, that's probably worth ignoring. I mean, that's just silly. On the other hand, we had people posting that Lemansky was definitely living in our city, that she had listed the dog for sale on Craigslist, that she had been arrested before she had ever even been found, and that the police had just quit investigating. None of these statements were factually correct, so we did respond to those and other legitimate concerns. Let me share with you some negative comments that did surprise me. After we had received so many calls to the police department, I think they were coming in at the rate of 1 per minute during the peak, I went to Facebook and asked people not to continue to call in so that the station and dispatch wouldn't be overwhelmed. The point being that we were already aware of the situation. Well, that didn't sit all right with some people. Some flat out said that they didn't care, and that the only thing that would stop them from calling was when this woman was arrested. Many felt that relentless and repetitive calling would actually bring faster action. Some commented on the dispatcher's work ethic. Others chided the police for not working fast enough. But as you know, people are emboldened on social media and say things that I don't think they would say face-to-face. But this is where your responsible Facebook community steps up to the plate and police themselves. We immediately began getting comments from those who defended our request and explained to people what could happen if response was delayed for someone with a real emergency because the lines were tied up. So I want to take this moment to thank all those who did that. It was appreciated. You want to be cautious about deleting comments. Again, refer back to your terms of service. Interestingly enough, I had one person ask me to delete some public comments. During this event, a lot of people researched Catherine Lemansky online and posted what they claimed was personal information about her, such as the address of property she owned, a photo of the truck she drove, and other information, I assume, in hopes that this would lead to finding her. This person contacted me and thought I should remove these posts because she just didn't think it was right. What I told her was that I would have no way of verifying if this information was even accurate. Some of it could have been public information that anyone could look up. And, once it had been posted, this information was probably already shared well beyond our page. So I did not delete it. You want to remember not to engage in a negative manner. Always state factual actions that you are taking. Stick with what you know and don't speculate. And respond publicly and take offline. By that I mean you can post a public comment asking that person to email or contact you offline. This tells others that you took the time to respond, but don't engage in a negative back and forth on the page. You don't have to discuss every detail in public with a disgruntled person. Publicly thank your supporters. There's nothing wrong with saying thank you. I appreciate your understanding and support. So I just kind of want to go over some final tips. Don't think it can't happen to you. As a PIO, I was expecting a hurricane or a flood or other natural disaster, not a dog. So you just have to expect the unexpected. You need to understand that the nature of social media is that it can be chaotic and unpredictable. You won't always get everything just right in these kinds of situations. You know, lessons will be learned, and that's valuable. I actually welcomed this experience as great training despite the fact that it intruded on a vacation. Because we didn't do anything wrong as an agency, and we did a lot right to resolve this. I consider this an opportunity for a dry run, for something in the future that might have greater consequences. And you know, remember that you'll never please 100% of the people. You will have critics. That's just the way it is. Remember that transparency and credibility matters. If you don't know something, it's okay to say that. When people complained that it was taking too long to find Lemansky, I said that I understood their frustration, but that an official police investigation does take time. You know, listen and respond. Show empathy and concern. I tried to use words like we were concerned, that the photo was disturbing, that we're taking every action we can, so the people understood that we really did understand their concerns. When it's all over, do a hot wash and figure out what worked and what didn't. So I just want to thank you for your time, and I guess it's back to you, Dustin.
Thank you so much. So we're going to open it up for some Q&A, and we have some great questions that have already come in. So one is just about getting elected officials on board. How do you get elected officials on board if if they don't understand the role of social media? Is that something that you had to deal with, or did you have an elected board that kind of got it from day one?
No, it took some discussions to bring everybody on board. I think people are always afraid, what are we going to do about the negative comments? But, you know, I think it just took talking about it, how we'd handle things, and understanding that this is really where everybody's at right now. There is an expectation that you'll have a social media presence from most people, and so they finally agreed.
That's great. So the next question is, can you describe what hot wash is?
Hot wash is what you, in emergency planning, is what you do after the event's over, so everyone involved sits down, goes over what worked, what didn't work, what do we have to change, what can we plan for the future. It's just a great way to go over the whole event.
Great. In hindsight, is there anything that you would have done different?
Well, good question. In retrospect, I think I would have tried to post updates a little more frequently, maybe more than the 2 hours. I would have done more public thank yous to those who expressed support. You know, it was coming in fast and furious. A lot of people supported our department and our agency, and I think I would have, maybe tried to take the time to say, hey, thank you, appreciate your support, appreciate your comments. And I would have done that publicly. And then because I was on vacation, I have to admit I did not have my disaster plan with me. So now my disaster plan and my crisis communication plan are loaded on a thumb drive, and I'll have it with my computer.
That's great. So is that where you would recommend individuals start, with kind of having that foundational plan in place? Where is that starting point, kind of in your opinion?
Oh, I think it absolutely starts with a plan. I think you have to have a plan to outline what you're going to do, who's responsible for what, and what are the steps you take. And then that will just automatically take over. As I said, you're in the middle of a fast-moving event. You don't want to try to invent everything at that point.
Got it. So another question just came in as to, did you have any help with your social media? And this individual, being a PIO, has to worry about social media in addition to putting out press releases on the incident, as well as doing all the TV and radio interviews. So what do you recommend?
Oh, that's a great question. I didn't have any help, but because I was so far away, all I could focus on was social media, so I guess that was a good thing. I let the police handle any media inquiries. There's absolutely no way you could do both. So, and the other thing that I learned is I have to identify someone else in the department who understands social media and who could step into that role, because you can't do it all.
Mm-hmm. Great points. Great points. So the next question is, you talked a little bit about deleting comments and some of the concerns with doing that. Have you ever experienced a situation where you had to remove a comment from your social media accounts, and what do you recommend agencies do that have to take that action?
Well, of course, you have to go by your policies and your terms of service. I did not delete any comments during this event. However, there was one threatening comment toward the dog's owner that probably did meet the terms of service for removal, but I didn't even see it until the event was over, so it was a moot point. But I try not to delete comments.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And as we transition to our next speaker, I want to provide another poll question and give everyone an opportunity to answer this one. What is your primary concern about using social media to communicate in a crisis? Are you concerned about rumors, managing response, lack of followers, records themselves, lack of understanding or how to do it? Or are there other things that you're concerned about? And while you're answering that, I'm going to introduce our next speaker, Christie Wyatt. So Christie Wyatt serves as the Director of Communications and Intergovernmental Relations for the City of San Marcos, Texas. She began her service to the City of San Marcos in January 2015. In her current position, she oversees media relations, the city website, newsletters, a cable channel, and social media sites. She strives to keep citizens informed and engaged, and she has spoken at state and national conferences and won multiple state awards for social media and delivering high-quality communications programs. Christie and her team were recently named Best of Austin by the Austin Chronicle for their work during the Memorial Day weekend flood. So before I hand it over to Christie, let's take a look at what some of the responses were on our last poll question. So it looks like managing response is one of the big concerns around using social media. And that's something that continues to pop up time and time again. So with that, I will hand the reins over to Christie. Christie, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Dustin. Thanks for having me. I'm going to elaborate a little bit on what we've already heard. Definitely disasters happen when you least expect them. And just like was mentioned before, Jeannie's event happened during a holiday weekend. Several of my events in 2015 also happened during holidays. So 2015 was a year of crisis in San Marcos. Me personally, I have named it the year of hell and high water because we started off the year, I was hired in mid-January, came to the city and started making my plans and getting to know the staff and kind of taking inventory of our communication. And then in early March, we were the target of a DDoS attack, and an offliner, who is a hacktivist, targeted our community. It started on a Friday afternoon where there were social media posts about an officer who had allegedly gotten into an altercation with a college student outside of a bar late at night and knocked her to the ground and broke her teeth. And so I started seeing the talk on social about it, and I reached out to our people who run our police Facebook page, which I was still getting a handle on social media because I'd only been there in the city about 6 weeks, and I didn't get a response. So Saturday, there were a few more comments about this police officer, and Sunday it started escalating, and I never was able to get a hold of anyone, so I hid a few things and I responded to a few things. So Monday morning when I came into work, I immediately called the police department and I said, social media doesn't sleep and this stuff has happened over the weekend. Give me some background on this. And I quickly found out that the incident was actually several years old. So it did happen several years before. The officer that was involved had already been fired. He'd gone through the justice system. He was arrested. And so we had done everything right in this situation. We had acted quickly and we had discovered that we had an officer who made bad choices and we took care of it. But this person was continuing to spread the rumors on social media as if it was happening right now and demanding that if we did not arrest the officer and fire the officer, that he was going to attack our website. So by this point, I went to check the website because I saw the threatening message, and our website was gone. We were not able to access the website, and it was offline for about 4 days. In talking more to the police department, I discovered that they deleted a lot of the messages associated with this incident, which was a cause for concern for me for several reasons. One, we have record retention laws, and two, we want to be able to keep this information. And actually, a few weeks later, we were contacted by the FBI, who requested all of the documents related to this and all of our social media records. Luckily, we were using a trial of an archiving system, and that archiving system was able to help us to gather that information. The FBI was able to use it to eventually arrest this hacktivist who had also taken down the state of Arizona's website. So that was in March. In May, Memorial Day weekend, we experienced what has been called a flood of record. We had about 800 homes were damaged. Nearly a dozen people lost their lives in our county, and we were in our Joint Emergency Operations Center with the county for 2 weeks. I was home actually with bronchitis, very ill, when the weather began to take shape, and I was eventually evacuated from my home at about 3 a.m., and so we went immediately to the Emergency Operations Center and started utilizing social media, doing radio interviews and television interviews with agencies from around the globe, and that was a very, very significant incident for us. And then less than 6 months later, we were hit again with another devastating flood, also a flood of record. This flood was October, Halloween weekend, and 1,000 homes were damaged or destroyed in that flood. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how to plan ahead for an emergency, because as you can see, I experienced 3 emergencies just in 2015. Did not expect any of them, but we have to be prepared for when it will happen. You may be in a small town or a sleepy town or town where not a lot happens, but we are all going to experience it at some point or another, whether it's something that's gone viral, like the incident that we heard about before, or whether it's a natural disaster like what I experienced, or a hacktivist attack like I experienced as well. But the first thing that I have to tell you is that social media emergency crisis communication does not start when your crisis begins. It should start when you get onto a social media platform. You should already be thinking about how you're going to use it and what you're going to do in the event of emergency. And then you also have to make sure that you're building trust with your audience through that social site before anything ever happens. And so we see a lot of times that agencies will have an RSS feed from their website to go to their social media page, or they post things on social media, but they never engage or ask questions, or they don't answer questions or respond to the people that are on the site. And so you're not building any kind of engagement or trust with your audience, with your online community, unless you're having frequent engagement with them on a daily basis. And so you want to begin to do that right now before anything happens. Invite them to share with you. So ask open-ended questions when you're posting to encourage people to talk to you. Also use social media to communicate minor emergencies and issues in your community. So don't just wait for that big flood or that hurricane or earthquake, but talk about things like minor power outages or streets that are closed, so people get used to hearing information from you and using your social media site as an authority and a source for gathering information. And then be present. And that just is a reminder that we can't just post things. It's not a website. We should be having two-way communication. So you should be actually social on your social media sites to begin to create some conversation with your residents and create a sense of conversation online. Also, when you're planning for emergency response, as you put together your plans or as you begin to think about how you would respond, make sure that you're recruiting people in your organization who understand social media and can help you when there is a disaster. Now, that doesn't mean that you need to go out and hire a social media manager or that you need to necessarily have extra staff. It may be the case, but most of us don't have the kinds of budgets for that. I know I don't. And so one of the things that we do is we look throughout the organizations and we look for people who are internet and social media savvy. And so for us, that was our Main Street coordinator, who manages our downtown program, and they manage a social media site. We have oversight of all of the social media sites for the city, but they manage a page, and they do a very good job of engaging. And so they have a good grasp of what social media is and how to use it well. And so we recruited that person to be a part of our emergency response team, Samantha, and she was instrumental in helping us during both the flood situations. Also, we recruited interns who have good experience on social media. You can see there a picture of Tara. Tara works for KTSW, which is our student radio channel for Texas State University. She started interning with us a week before the Memorial flood, and she managed the social media pages right along with us, and she was a great asset in our emergency response team. So look for those opportunities, whether it's somebody in your school district or in a business, a private business that you can have to come in and help you, or whether it's interns from high school or colleges nearby that may be able to help you when there's a disaster. And then also make sure that you have established policies and you're talking about them all the time, especially with these people that aren't in your office on a daily basis. Meet with them frequently so that they understand their role and their responsibility, and they understand the rules and regulations regarding your social media sites. And then also practice and exercise so that when you are in a situation, you won't be caught off guard. I know that there are some tools out there, and we're actually looking at some simulation tools that will give you scenarios that will help you to be able to, in real time, go and look for information or respond to information. One of the things that I learned at a recent conference was when there's a big event that happens, maybe not in your own community, utilizing that event to go and search hashtags and see how effective your team is at gathering information online outside of your site. And so that's kind of one of the tools that we will be putting into practice pretty soon. During the crisis, the first thing that you want to do is act quickly. We know, and it was reiterated, I'm reiterating what we heard earlier, that you want to make sure that you get your message out there quickly. And you don't know all the facts when a disaster occurs, but you want to have information out there. And I've heard this from people who have managed school shootings, airport shootings, all kinds of natural disasters. If you don't get ahead of the social media, it will happen without you. And so you can't go back and capture all of the misinformation that's out there, but what you can do is put out the facts as you know them as quickly as possible so that people don't begin to make things up. Now that's not going to stop people. There will still be rumors and misinformation out there, but if you are the authority, you want to be the first to get information out there, even if it's just to say, here are the facts that we know now. We don't have answers to all of your questions, but we can tell you X, Y, or Z. And so that's very important. When we were dealing with our flooding situation, we started well before flooding began with just making sure that we were sharing National Weather Service alerts. So anytime we got an alert for a flash flood warning or a flash flood watch, or information about roads the water crossings that were being closed down, we were already pushing that out before we ever had a flood situation. You can see that Saturday at 7 p.m. was one of our first messages that we pushed out, and we actually didn't have flooding until about 4 a.m. on Sunday morning. So we were well ahead of it, trying to put information out there so people would utilize us as the source of information. Also, you want to create a hashtag as quickly as possible so that you can begin to gather your information, and also you can search information that other people are using. We use the hashtag SMTXFlood, and it was really crucial for us after the flood to be able to search that hashtag and see what people were talking about, and we still continue to use that hashtag as we're in the recovery stage of our flood event. And then keep information flowing. Even if nothing is happening, please be sure to continue to post. So don't let hours and hours go by without your audience hearing from you, even if it's just to share safety tips or background information. And this is a trick I learned from my years in the news business when I was a news producer. You have airtime to fill on the news, and so they often will go and find an expert when there's for example, a chemical spill, and they'll talk to you all about the background of the chemical and how the chemical reacts and how long the plant has been open. And so even when you don't have any information, you can always provide background information or safety information related to whatever your incident is, to make sure that you're continually pushing out information and the conversation doesn't stop. Also, during the crisis, please be sure to use your follower content. So we allowed our residents and we encouraged our residents to be our eyes and ears, because we obviously couldn't be everywhere at one time. We had a very small team of volunteers and staff working on social media and media relations during both flood situations, and we couldn't necessarily get out of the EOC and leave and go take damage pictures, but we did encourage our residents to share with us. And as you can see on the two pictures on the right-hand side of your screen, we had people sending us views of their street with their cars underwater. We actually had a person who was on their roof needing to be rescued who reached out to us on Facebook with that picture of them sitting on the roof. Not the best way probably to get response in an emergency, but sometimes during emergency situations your 911 center will become backed up and people will have a hard time getting through. So please remember that people will use any way possible to reach you, and social media sometimes is the way that people use to reach out. We find that a lot on the weekends when City Hall is closed. When people have a crisis, they will reach out to us on social. Also, use your posts to address rumors and misinformation and create awareness, and that was talked about as well, but we started a rumor control page on our website, and anytime we found a rumor, and we actually asked people to send them in to us, and we also utilize our social media volunteers to seek them out on pages outside of our own, we would post on that website the rumor and then the information, and then we do a push over to social media so that we could debunk that rumor and get out the real information. And it became really valuable to our residents, and the media also used it quite frequently when they were dealing with rumors that were going on social media and trying to separate the fact from the fiction. Also, during the crisis, use social media to help you manage the media, the traditional media. As you can see on that top picture, we had daily press conferences, sometimes 2 press conferences a day or more, where we had sometimes as many as 100 reporters who would show up. They would have questions. They were giving me their cards, add me to your media list. Can I talk to you? Can I ask you a question? And I had very limited time trying to put out press releases, trying to deal with social media, trying to coordinate information from all different agencies from the state and the federal government and our local agencies. So we just didn't have time to deal with them individually or to go and add people to our press release list. And so what we started doing is pushing out our press conference information on Twitter and on Facebook. And I know that some other agencies do this during emergencies, but you can see right here kind of in the middle of the screen on the right, we sent out a tweet for media only. And we would send this out quite frequently anytime we had a press conference that had basically the location and time of the press conference, so that we would make sure that the media got it. We also pushed out press releases this way. Now, we still utilized our press release list, but there were always people who wanted to be added, and we didn't always have the opportunity to do that. So we just used it as a safeguard, and it was very helpful. Also, share the media stories when they're accurate. They can paint a picture that you maybe don't have time to tell, and so if they did a good job and they're sharing information that's helpful to your residents, you can also share their stories on your social media. And then also, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, but a lot of times their stories will involve you or your staff, and so you want to make sure that you're sharing that as well. During a crisis, you also want to make sure that you're using multimedia tools as much as possible. Right now, anybody will tell you that on Facebook and even on Twitter, video and photos are king, and they help you get more engagement. They work with those crazy algorithms that the social media companies have, and they help you get more reach. And so anytime that you can share video of action, please do so. Anytime that you can post video of your press conferences, do so. I know a lot of people are using Periscope, and now Facebook Live is available for pages, and so those are good opportunities for pushing out press conferences. Now, we did not do that, but we did record every single press conference just with our cell phone, and when it was over, we would post that video. And you don't know, I can't tell you how many times the media would call and say, can you post that video? So we were able to do that so that they could get it if they weren't able to make it, because we actually had several times where, depending on where the media was, they weren't able to get to us because of flooded roads or closed roads. So they were still able to be active and have that press conference to follow. Also, you don't need a lot of equipment. You don't need a special camera. You can just use your cell phone and really upload that right to YouTube and share the link. Use compelling images and video to get attention. As you'll see on the left-hand side of your screen, that truck in the water, that is our rescue vehicle. And I know many of you probably have MRAPs or old military vehicles that have been converted to rescue vehicles. And you've probably dealt with backlash from certain members of the community who feel like the police is being militarized and who don't feel that it's appropriate. Well, we use this as an opportunity to kind of debunk that rumor as well. We had to utilize our MRAP during our October flood to rescue kids at an elementary school. The elementary school was flooded, all the roads around it were flooded, they weren't able to get buses in, so we had to go in and individually rescue about 50 kids at a time and get all 609 students and teachers out of the school, and we used that MRAP. We actually, not with my permission, the police officers let a reporter into the MRAP, and so we were able to use their video as well as cell phone video that we have. It showed the students in the vehicle, and there were a lot of upset parents thinking their kids were devastated and crying, and we actually saw that the kids had a lot of fun in the MRAP, if you can believe that. The officers kept them calm. They were really excited. You could hear them laughing and squealing and kind of excited, like they were sort of in the middle of a amusement park ride, even though it was a rescue. And so that put some people at ease as well, and it kind of changed perspectives on the MRAP vehicle. So we were able to utilize compelling video to really change some people's minds, and we got a lot of engagement on this. I think there's about 500,000 reach on that one post. Also utilize albums. Facebook albums are great. We utilize them for a lot of different purposes. We posted information that was correlated with our website, so we would put the website link in a picture, so every time we updated our donation locations, we were able to post that photo from the album with the link and identify new information about where donations could be dropped off or where volunteers could sign up. And we also utilized the albums in another way, a much more serious way, and it's heartbreaking to talk about this, but these are the people who were victims of our Memorial Weekend flood. And like I said, we had a lot of people who lost their lives. And one of the very difficult things to deal with as a PIO in an emergency is notifications of bodies being found and deaths. And almost daily, we were recovering bodies from the floodwaters. And as we got bodies in, they were sent to the medical examiner, and we had to figure out if we could match those bodies with people who were missing. And so we actually utilized two methods to keep track of this. One was our Facebook album, and we put in photos of everybody that we knew was missing. And then as we found bodies, we would update this information with the list of the body count. And as we identified people, we would go on their photo and post a message of condolence to their family and allow that photo thread to be utilized for people to grieve and to share that message with the families and friends of the people who lost their lives. Reporters were able to use this as a reference because several times a day, several times an hour, usually I would get phone calls saying, what is the latest on the body count, and what is the latest on the people that have been recovered, and do you know if this person's alive? Do you know if this person has passed away? And I would always refer them to this so that I wasn't talking off the top of my head, or I didn't have to go pull out a spreadsheet, but we would keep this updated as soon as we had information so the reporters knew exactly the correct information. They could match a picture with a name, and they knew the details of whether that person was still missing or where they were found. And we also, in our makeshift press conference room, which was the back garage bays of our police department, we also had these photos. We printed out the album and we posted it for reporters to be able to reference also in hard copy. We just pasted it on the side of a police vehicle. Also, during the crisis, use personalities to spread your message, whether that message is a good one or a bad one. You can see this Facebook cover photo at the top of the screen. This is Captain Jay Horton. Jay Horton recently retired just in the last few weeks, but he was instrumental in saving lots of lives. He was our poster child for water rescues. He trained many, many people in the department, and he'd worked for dozens of years in the fire department. But during the Memorial Weekend flood, he rescued this young lady, and we were able to capture the rescue on film. And so we utilized this picture of Jay quite frequently. And we started getting inquiries about who is this guy and can you tell us the story and who is this woman from the media. And we were able to get lots of interviews with Jay from the media because they wanted to talk about this water rescue. But what we used it for is an opportunity to really talk to people about water safety and flood safety. And Jay is very passionate about that, so we utilized him quite frequently. And while the media really wanted the story of the sensational, daring rescue, we were able to talk about how dangerous it is to walk into floodwater, how dangerous it is to drive into water, and how volatile the water can be, and literally ripping the clothes off the people that have been rescued. And so Jay was great for that. Anderson Cooper's team came down and talked to him. He actually took them into the river and showed them some life-saving techniques that we were able to pass on to our audience. And so we got a lot of media coverage with Jay, but able to spread our own message of safety and not just the situation with this one particular rescue. And then also I talked to you guys earlier about the MRAP driver and our rescue vehicle drivers who took their cell phone video with kids, and that was also really important. Also using personality to spread your message, a bad one. This picture on the right-hand side is a woman who was a scammer after our first flood, and she started going around to neighborhoods and knocking on doors and telling people that she was a flood victim. She was certainly a personality. And she would go into their homes and steal things and also get donations from them. She went to many of our flood recovery resource centers and got donations, just scamming the entire community. And so we found out about her. We posted her picture on our police department Facebook page. And very quickly, people started commenting, and there were hundreds and thousands of comments of people who knew her or been scammed by her or had a friend who was scammed by her. And one of our Facebook commenters finally called us and said, hey, this lady is at the Goodwill and she's talking about being a flood survivor. I recognize her from Facebook. We were able to go and arrest her. And so we were able to use that also to spread the message about scam artists, because there were many. She was just one of the many in the community. And then also a really quick reminder for everybody that whenever there's an emergency situation or a disaster, whether it's a dog that who's had his mouth taped shut, or whether it's a flood or a hurricane, people have very high emotions, and they're looking for someone to blame, and it can bring out the worst in you. And as you sit at your computer as a social media manager, it can sometimes be very difficult because it feels like people are beating up on you and your community and all those hardworking people who are giving 18 and 20 and 23 hours a day to the community to try to help recover, but also just try to focus on the positive. There are positive messages out there. Share them, whether they're on your page or not, and just remember that you're really providing life-saving information to people in some cases. Just don't get drawn into the social media scuffle, and kind of take a deep breath and think before you respond, especially to someone who's very angry. And then also allow your community to respond on your behalf. A lot of times, I will see a really negative comment, maybe about police or fire during an emergency like this, and I'll want to immediately respond, but before I can, one of our residents will come to our rescue and say, you know what, these people are working hard for us, they helped save my grandma, or they were there as soon as I called. And so a lot of times we have advocates that work for us on our behalf because they have been following our pages and getting information from us. And then also utilize it as a way to bring the community together. You can see the heart logo on the bottom of the screen. This is something that our tourism department came up with immediately after the Memorial weekend flood, SMTX Stronger Together, and we created a hashtag in this logo. We asked all of our community to change their profile picture on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram to this picture, and it was really touching to see how many people participated in that and how many people were really behind us, and it kind of helped to outweigh some of the negative that we were dealing with. So after the crisis, what do you do? First of all, keep it up. So you're going to be tired. You're not going to want to look at social media. You've been going 100 miles an hour, but you can't take a break because now all of a sudden you have new followers, you have people that are paying attention, and they're used to getting content from you. So please be sure to keep sharing content. Also share content from other agencies and partners, especially success stories. I mentioned sharing earlier about sharing the media's content, but there are also other partners that you work with. I know in our disasters, we had partners with the Red Cross and Samaritan's Purse, the United Way, who were all here with boots on the ground trying to help out our community. And so we were able to share some of their content, some of their success stories from their pages. So it's not always about trying to create content. Sometimes it's just about sharing what's already there. Take a look back after your disaster. Go back and put together a timeline. My ArchiveSocial is who we use, and we were able to utilize them to go back and really put together a timeline of when did we first put out messages to our community? When did we evacuate, and how did we push those messages out? When did we enforce a curfew? And so instead of trying to go back or take a log or take notes during the incident, I was able to use my social media to really put together a look at the incident. And I use this all the time, whether it's answering reporter questions or doing talks. This is a picture of me talking to a social media class in the university, or even when we're putting together award entries for some of our organizations that we belong to. I've been able to use that timeline to really put together a picture of what happened and how it happened. Also figure out your successes and the lessons learned. The question everybody asks is, what would you do differently? And we're always going to ask ourselves that, but also, what do we do right? Because it takes a lot to manage social media during a disaster, and sometimes you deserve a pat on the back. And also, remembering the things that you did right will help you to remember to do those things the next time. And then tell your story and share your experience. It's really helpful when people know that they're not alone in going through these things. So as a communicator, share with your organizations that you're a part of, share with the community your story of what you did. We have done a lot of talks. We've shared with a lot of our partners, and it's helped everybody. I think it's helped us to really let it sink in, some of the things that we did well and the things that we're striving to do better, just to say it over and over again. And also it's helped other people to realize that they do need to have a plan and to kind of think about some of the things that we were faced with, how they would react if they were faced with the same thing. Also remember anniversaries. We are coming up on the 1-year anniversary of our Memorial Weekend flood, and I think it's important to acknowledge when those things happen to bring them back up every year. And one, thank the people who worked so hard during those crisis situations, and also everybody who donated and volunteered, and also remember those lives that were lost. And then lastly, really to say thank you. We created a video, and you can see a little image screenshot of our video that we posted on social, thanking everybody who helped us during those crisis situations. We put up a billboard in town. So we not only use social media, but some traditional methods to really say thank you to the community, because social media is really a community, and you don't do it alone. You may manage it, but it takes every person who follows you and shares and comments to really create this conversation that can make an impact on your community. And then the very last thing I want to say is when I first started at City of San Marcos in January, we had 2,500 followers, and now we're approaching 16,000. A lot of those followers came during the time of and the months after the first flood. And I've heard a lot of people say, well, you only grew followers because you had a flood. Well, that's partially true, and it's not. We had a lot of conversations with our neighbors in cities surrounding us, our county and some other agencies, and they did grow too, but no one grew to the extent that we did. So just having disaster isn't going to grow your engagement. It's not going to grow your social media per se. It may a little bit, but if you're really looking to engage and create a bigger community of people within your reach, you have to be consistent. So you have to follow all of the things that I mentioned before about planning ahead and being active and present in social and having good information, making sure that you're an authority and a resource for your community so that you can grow, because growing doesn't just happen magically because you have a disaster. It's because of what you do before, during, and after the disaster. And so I think that's pretty much all I have. I'm going to send it back over to Dustin for any questions.
Great. Yeah, I think we have time for a couple questions. Keep your questions rolling in. So the first question is, during the floods, were social media postings from different agencies coordinated, and which jurisdictions took the lead?
We had a joint emergency operations center with Hays County. We took the lead on social media just because we were a little bit more active on social, and we allowed the county, we work with them to do a lot more of the press releases because they have only one person who works there. And so she is really great at press releases, and so we just utilize our strengths. So those were the two agencies that coordinated, the county and the city. But we also talked to some of our neighbors. We belong to a network of Austin area PIOs, and we kind of worked with some of their messages as well. But the two main agencies were those two. And then as far as our other pages, we have, I don't know, about 10 or 12 social media pages throughout the city for police and the animal shelter. But we directed everyone in the beginning to our city page because we didn't want to have to try to manage content on several pages and questions. We pushed all of our disaster information, and we posted in the very beginning for flood information. Please be sure to follow the city's page, and we gave the link. We did push some stuff out on police department if it was specifically crime related or related to police, but for the majority of our information, it was pushed through the city's account, and then sometimes it was shared to some of our neighbors and definitely to the county's pages.
Got it. Next question is, can you explain archiving and how it applies to your social media content in San Marcos?
Okay. For us, we utilize an archiving service. In Texas, we have laws that require us to archive our information as a government entity. We basically signed up for the service for a free trial in March. A few days later, we actually had that hacktivist attack. And so how it works for us is everything is archived by the minute. So whether something's deleted or not deleted, it still shows up in our archive. And then we can go back and search. So I can keyword search flood, and everything that's ever been mentioned on our own pages about flood will pop up. That includes comments that people made, posts that we shared, the photos attached to the comments. And so it's very helpful in being able to gather information and search for information. I know when we have public information requests, which we actually did after that first hacktivism incident, we had someone request information about any time on our social media sites a specific derogatory word was used. And we were able to put in that word and look to see if there was anything there, and we were able to give that report to our city clerk's office to fulfill the public information request. So that's how it's used. And I think Anil will talk a little bit more about ArchiveSocial. There are several archiving companies out there. I've used ArchiveSocial for the last several years in 2 different cities, and so it's just the one that I trust.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again for joining us. And as I introduce Anil with ArchiveSocial, I want to put up another poll question for you to answer. What types of situations has social media proven impactful as a method of reaching citizens? And while you're answering that, I'll introduce our next speaker, Anil Chawla. He's the founder and CEO of ArchiveSocial, the public sector's leading provider of technology designed to help government agencies archive and manage risk related to social media. ArchiveSocial partnered with the state of North Carolina in 2010 to launch the world's first open, interactive archive of social media. Since then, ArchiveSocial has enabled hundreds of government entities such as the City of Spokane, Snohomish County, and the U.S. Department of Justice to maintain records of social media for legal protection and public records requirements. The company was selected for the prestigious Code for America Accelerator in 2013, recognized as a 2014 Cool Vendor in Government by leading analyst firm Gartner, and honored as a GovTech 100 company earlier this year by Government Technology. So with that, before I hand it over to Anil, let's take a look at our poll results. Looks like social media has proven most impactful around feel-good stories, closely followed by community events. Very good. Anil, the floor is yours.
Dustin, thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you most of all to Jeannie and Christy for your participation today. You guys are at the front lines, just like many of our attendees here on the presentation today, having to both day-to-day inform citizens as well as deal with these outrageous and tragic incidents that do arise. And I thank you for what you did during those circumstances to inform the public and ensure that the right information was getting out for people to be up to date and safe. And two, for coming here today to share your story and give everybody so many key takeaways, really concrete action items for people to think about for the possibility of any agency listening in having to deal with a similar circumstance. So again, thank you for that. Now, as Dustin said, I am with ArchiveSocial. And at ArchiveSocial, what we do is we provide technology that helps you automatically archive and manage risks related to social media. And Christy actually just touched on this in her last answer to the question that came up about archiving. Day-to-day in public sector across the United States, there are public records laws and requirements around record keeping and archiving, and the risk for public records requests and legal situations related to your social media. But in a crisis situation, all of that risk is greatly magnified. And so we provide this technology day-to-day, again, to protect organizations. But what I'm really, really proud to do, introduce to all of you here listening in today, is a new initiative where ArchiveSocial is going to provide access to all of our record-keeping risk management technology around social media at no cost to any public agency experiencing a crisis. And we call this initiative ArchiveSocial Crisis Support. And what I'd like to spend the next 15 minutes or so doing is introducing you to what ArchiveSocial Crisis Support is, how your agency can take advantage of it, and so on. Now, in order to really explain what crisis support is and why it's so important to have the archiving record keeping to that last question, I'm going to start out by overviewing the reasons for archiving in general in government, the type of risk that we've seen agencies face as we've worked with hundreds of public agencies across the country. I'm going to give you a number of real case studies so you can understand both day-to-day the types of risks that come up, as well as what happens in a crisis. And we've already had a really good taste of how important the information is on social media from the stories that we heard from Jean and Christy. Once we level set on the importance of social media and the types of risks that may arise, I will introduce you to ArchiveSocial Crisis Support. Again, this is a no-cost offering available to any agency in a crisis. I want to provide a technology demonstration so you can see exactly what's available to your agency if and when you do face a crisis. And then we'll of course close with questions. So please continue to use that Q&A window and we'll address your questions at the end. Now, to kick this off, again, stepping back to understand why is record keeping around social media so important? What are the risks that you might face? The number one fundamental issue to understand is that social media is public record, exactly like your email. And this goes back to how public records laws are written. And again, every state, I've pulled up just one example from the state of California. It's a big state. I know we have a lot of attendees from that state here today. The California Public Records Act, again, like all Freedom of Information Acts or public records laws in the country, were written several decades ago. But they were written in a very forward-thinking fashion to say, regardless of physical form, the communications that you may prepare, send, transmit, receive in relation to your agency's business will constitute public record. And this regardless of physical form is really what's important. And the way to think about this is if you have a crime tip that comes in, it doesn't matter if that crime tip is on a piece of paper, in an email, or in a Twitter direct message. A crime tip is a crime tip. Similarly, when you're putting out an emergency alert in a crisis, the fact that you're able to do that with Twitter and Facebook today is a fantastic development for society. That information can virally spread. It's real time, but an announcement of a street being flooded over, or the fact that your law enforcement officials are in a particular area and you don't want people to expose their location if there's an active shooter, those types of situations you're communicating over Twitter, they're just as important as if you had communicated them in more traditional formats. And again, in your state, a law like this, likely every state has a public records law. And there's likely guidance already around social media being a record. In California, CalREM has very clear guidance now on social media being treated as a public record based on certain criteria, which practically every agency encounters in their use of social media. So I encourage you to look state by state, and we at ArchiveSocial have an entire map of the United States that spells that out for your state. Now, so we can talk all day about the law. Theoretically, social media can be a record, but what does that look like in reality? And so I've just pulled up, again, a few examples here. In the top left, in the spirit of this discussion around crisis communications, crisis situations are often very, very tragic, but social media has truly been a silver lining. And at the top left, we can see San Bernardino. Obviously, they had the terrorist shooting not too long ago, and we saw how SB County was using Twitter to inform the public of this active shooter. And again, these are real-time communications. They're not documented elsewhere. They're only on Twitter, and it's such an important communication to have a record of. On the middle there, sort of on the right of the slide, our hometown city of Durham, North Carolina, where I'm standing right now, we had this situation that actually isn't that uncommon, where 911 became unavailable for a portion of the citizens here. And the only way to really inform the citizens of how to reach 911 was to use social media. Again, a really, really important communication on social media. It's only on Twitter, but it's not going to be on Twitter forever. There's no guarantee that it will be. And then finally, in the bottom left, outside of the crisis communications and these tragic circumstances, day-to-day social media used by government is there to better serve the citizens. It's customer service. And we have an example from someone asking for, grass to be cut on a sidewalk at an elementary school, and the Austin Code Department responding back on exactly how they can approach that. So these types of customer service interactions can certainly generate records for you day to day. Now, as these records are being created on social media, the next question is, who's asking for them and when will you need to produce them? Well, we've already heard some really clear examples of that in crisis situations with the duct tape dog incident, the international and national media asking for that information. And of course, in San Marcos, the circumstances around the FBI, on the website hacking, that circumstance that brought in the FBI, as well as the floods. People need this information. One really clear example that I can point out here that is a sign of the times is in Seattle. This is about 2 years ago now. In Seattle, Seattle PD has a Twitter feed for every police beat that provides up-to-date information about what's happening, kind of like a police scanner. But it's on Twitter. And a citizen noticed that some of the Twitter feeds seemed to be missing or at least delayed with reporting the police incidents. And he reached out to Seattle PD over Twitter and said, I want the archives of all of your tweets available. Please consider this a Public Records Act request. So this was a public records request for social media using social media. Again, a sign of the times. Seattle PD directed the citizen to fill out their public records form on their website, but did acknowledge this as a real public records request because the citizen wanted to see, was it the fact that Twitter.com no longer had the information? Did Seattle PD have a better archive of what was actually put out there because what he was seeing online was not accurate? Now, that's a very, very specific incident. Most agencies we work with, although some are now receiving specific requests around social media, most have not received a request like this, but they are receiving requests that you see in the bottom right there on the slide that they've always received. Any and all documents related to, all reports of the incident, all notifications of the street closure, all emails and communications. These are requests that are really agnostic of how it was communicated. They could be very, very specific to a topic, and how it was communicated doesn't really matter, but more and more social media satisfies all of these broad statements. And our customers are now thinking about how to really fulfill their obligations by providing that social media content, which may have the bulk of the information related to, say, that street closure. And again, in the polls that we've done today, nearly half of you said that social media was the most prominent area for you to put information out. So to think about these requests coming in after the fact and how you'd fulfill them. So if you look at all this and the importance of social media, the fact that it is generating public records and generating records not only in these crisis situations but day to day, the thought is, well, how do you produce it? And the first thing that you'll probably think to do is just go back to Facebook and Twitter. Now, that is something that you should absolutely try to do if you get a request, and hopefully that information is there right now. But it's worth noting that the networks have made no obligation to maintain those records for you forever. And in fact, when something's deleted, it is gone from the network. In fact, Facebook has guidance that says, if you're a law enforcement agency and you want information from us, you can issue a subpoena, but you need to do that before anything is deleted. So we at ArchiveSocial decided to do a study because we are the company that works predominantly with government. This is the issue that we care about the most. We wanted to find out how reliable is Facebook, and we took a sample of 400 government customers in the month of January. So this is really fresh, January of this year, and we monitor them, again, at random, 400 customers, and found that out of that 400 customers, nearly 7,800 or almost 8,000 records were deleted from Facebook in that time. And the way that we do this, we can automatically detect deletions on Facebook, and we can mark that in our archive. And so we detected these 1,700 deletions out of these 400 customers, almost 20 a customer in that 1 month. It turns out that not every customer had a deletion, but 3 out of 4 did. And in most cases, these are deletions that the customers aren't even aware of outside of our technology, because Facebook doesn't report this to you. You are probably not deleting a whole lot. Maybe you make a mistake here and there, and you have a typo and you delete a post and repost it. But citizens are deleting information that they may comment to you or private message to you. They may be deleting their Facebook profiles, which wipes out their history. So there's a lot of ways that this information can go away underneath your feet without you even knowing, and that's why it's so important to get this in your control. And many states have come out to say that in order to fulfill records requirements, you must have a strategy for taking that data off the networks and having it in your control. So that's where this all comes from, the importance of having this record keeping. Again, public records requests are magnified in a crisis. I want to actually share some real life case studies that we've encountered in our customer base. And again, starting with the day-to-day, because this risk exists, it's just magnified in a crisis. But to give you an idea of the types of situations that we've encountered in our customer base, starting in the bottom right of the country, southeast, South Florida, where the police department there in the South Florida city basically was trying to do their job. They had learned about a local company that they were told was a scam, running a scam. They were told this by a law firm, and they put information out on their social media about this scam and this company being a scam. And as you might imagine, the company didn't quite agree with that information. So the company came back and said, hey, we're not a scam. You need to take that off your Facebook. The police department did comply with that, but then not too long after that, the law firm for that local company contacted the city and said, we are filing a lawsuit now, and as part of getting ready for this lawsuit, our discovery request is that you produce all of the communications around us being a scam, and of course that would include the content that the police department had already deleted. So without the archiving in place, they would really start off on the wrong foot in this legal situation, not being able to produce records that they were obligated to have by law. Across the country, Santa Barbara Police Department, very similar to San Marcos, as Christie mentioned, being in a free trial. A member of our team had reached out to Santa Barbara PD about the importance of archiving and being proactive, and ultimately they decided to start a free trial. In 3 weeks into that free trial, the police department had been running these gun buyback programs in accordance with the city's programs, and a gun buyback program, as you know, is a very controversial topic. In 3 weeks into that free trial, this police department received a public information request from the NRA about all those communications. And again, they had the archive in time, just in time for this request, was able to, in a few clicks, produce the information, but they published a case study with government technology that you're all able to access after this session about how difficult it would be to produce content when there's a high volume. And so this was in a not a crisis situation, but similar challenges exist when you are in crisis with the amount of volume, particularly if you have viral photos of animals and being mistreated, as Jeannie experienced, more than 24,000 comments. How do you go back and find what you need without some kind of technology? Back across the country, we talked about one topic that comes up a lot is about removing content. Some agencies leave everything up, but many agencies have implemented policies around removing content. As Christie mentioned, they received a public information request for a derogatory term. You may not want to leave that derogatory term up on your Facebook page because it's offending everybody else. And so in Vineland, New Jersey, the police department actually had received guidance from their attorney to pretty much hide every comment that was coming up on Facebook and implement more of a one-way approach. Now, that's not something that we recommend, but they had been advised to do so by their attorney, and a citizen noticed that all the comments were being hidden. Citizen wasn't sure if they were being singled out or not, and so they threatened then to issue a public records request for all hidden social media comments every month. And the citizen actually followed through. And so this is what motivated the police department to put some technology in place, because it was a really painful, time-consuming process to go produce all that information. And finally, back across the country again, Snohomish County, Washington, you all may remember from about 2 years ago, the state of Washington, specifically Oso, Washington in Snohomish County, experienced a very tragic landslide that happened suddenly on a Saturday, as all of these crisis situations tend to occur. And the good news here, again, silver lining with social media, is that the communications team immediately jumped onto social media using Twitter. They coined a hashtag called #530slide to help coordinate the emergency response. And they'd already been archiving their social media, not only archiving it, but they have an open archive of their social media that's transparent to the public. And when the landslide had finished, this crisis was over for them, the next crisis begins for a communications team, because all of the public information requests come in, and they received more than 40 public information requests. And whenever those requests touch social media, they could simply push the requesters to this open archive of information so that anyone could replay that disaster timeline and see what happened. So those are the types of real-world situations. Again, I want to share with you what it looks like on the ground for agencies that are facing these circumstances, again, like South Daytona, like San Marcos, who are all archiving, and why it's so important to have an archive. Now, we at ArchiveSocial fundamentally believe that every agency in the United States using social media will need to proactively archive social media just like email, but we realize that you're not there yet. And that's exactly where crisis support comes in. If you find yourself in crisis and you do not have an archive yet to protect you from the day-to-day circumstances, ArchiveSocial will give you free access to our technology. Now, we do define a crisis in a certain way. You can visit our website, which I'll bring up here to see the full description of this program. But exactly what you heard about today, that's a crisis. Either a tragic circumstance that's threatening public safety, like the floods in Texas, or a mass shooting or an act of terrorism. Anything that's threatening public safety or has led to mass casualties is certainly a crisis, and we'll do what we can to help you out. But the other type of crisis, as Dustin talked about in the very beginning, the new definition of a crisis, is that it may not even be something in the real world. It may be something online in the virtual world, exactly like the situation that Gene experienced with the duct tape dog photo going viral and having to deal with this enormous amount of content coming on your social media. Those are the circumstances where we can help you out. If you're in crisis, just visit the dedicated website, govsocial.crisis. You can go there now just to take a look at it and simply request that access. Our team will evaluate your request within 24 hours. We'll try to do it as promptly as possible within 24 hours because these things happen on Saturdays. We'll get back to you, and we'll do our best to give you access as long as you fulfill the criteria of this program. We realize that in the midst of a crisis, as it's happening, this is not the number one thing you want to do. So what we want to do is give you a window there that within 14 days of a crisis, if you request access, we can actually backtrack and retroactively capture the history from when your crisis started on your social media, give you all that record keeping that you need. Then we'll give you 30 days more of access, archiving your social media as this crisis has unfolded and you're dealing with the aftermath. We also have technology around alerting and monitoring and analytics that can help you manage your risk. All of that at no cost. The only thing we ask is your participation in a feedback session. And this is really our way of trying to help out in the worst of worst circumstances, help out the public agencies that have helped us build a business in the first place. So that's what this is all about. Again, go to govcrisis.social to learn about it, and especially if you're in a crisis or know someone who is, share that URL with them, and we'll do what we can to help. We're unfortunately out of time here with the technology demonstration for you to see what this is all about, but we can help you with that offline. Those of you listening in right now, one of the things that we want to avoid is if you're in crisis, we don't want to bother you in a crisis. We don't want to reach out to you in the midst of your crisis. So if you're hearing this and you're saying, I want this to be set up when I'm in a crisis, but I may forget, in ArchiveSocial, we want you to reach out to us. Go ahead and send an email to docall@govcrisis.social. It's a do call list. And if we ever, hopefully not, but if we see your agency in a crisis situation in the news, we'll know that we can reach out to you to get you set up with this free program. So that's pretty much all I have. I want to just wrap up by saying, there's the day-to-day risks that every agency has to manage. We want you to think about that. But again, we'll do what we can to help you out. And here's my contact information. Again, visit our website to learn more. And that's all I have. I'm going to hand back to Dustin.
All right, thank you so much, Anil. Well, I want to be respectful of our 90-minute commitment, so we're going to have to wrap things up here. We've had a lot of questions about getting copies of the presentation. Within the next 48 hours, Government Technology will provide attendees with a link to the recording so that you can share that with colleagues. In addition, we have some new content that our experts have worked on, including those on this academy today, that really is designed to help you and equip you with a crisis communication plan. So you'll see that content as well bundled within that email. And in closing, I just wanted to thank everybody for joining us for today's Academy, especially Jeannie Willard, Christie Wyatt, Anil Chawla, and a special thanks to our partners at ArchiveSocial for enabling us to bring this discussion to you today. And we look forward to seeing you at the next GovTech Academy. Thanks for joining.